Hi, I'm Maya. There's not much to say about me, really. I grew up in a small house on the edge of town, the kind of place where everyone knows your name and your business. After high school, I started working at Sam's pub and kitchen, serving up beers and burgers. It's honest work and it pays the bills. One busy Thursday night, he walked in. Ryan. I didn't know it then, but he was about to turn my world upside down. He settled at one of my tables, with a smile that was a little too smooth. Handsome, sure, but there was something more. He had a way of looking at you like you were the only person in the room. Evening, I said, pen in hand, ready to take his order. A beer, whatever's on tap. And your name? He asked with a grin that felt a bit rehearsed. Maya. And the beer's coming right up, I replied, trying not to roll my eyes. I'd seen his type before. Charming, until they got what they wanted. Maya, he repeated, like he was tasting the word. Nice to meet you. I'm Ryan. I nodded, jotted down his order, and headed to the bar. I figured that would be the end of it. Serve him his beer, maybe make a bit of small talk, and move on to the next customer. But Ryan wasn't the wandering kind, nor was he here just for the booze. Every time I passed by, he had a question. Where was I from? What did I like to do for fun? Casual stuff, but his interest seemed real. He laughed easily, listened closely, and somehow 1 hour turned into 3. By the time his friend showed up, I felt like I'd known him for years. His friends were a rowdy bunch, clearly from the same polished world as him. They joked about golf trips and ski resorts, worlds away from my quiet, simple life. Yet Ryan didn't talk about that stuff. He kept the conversation on common ground: movies, music, the local football team. Ryan came back the next day, and the day after that. Each evening, he'd spend a few hours at my table, talking about nothing and everything. His persistence was something else. He didn't put on airs or try to impress me with his money or who his dad was. Heck, he didn't even bring it up until I asked why he didn't seem to work the usual 9 to 5. My dad's a big shot in the state office, he admitted, but shrugged like it was no big deal. Means I've got the freedom to live a bit differently, that's all. And here you are, spending your evenings in a bar with me, I pointed out. Best part of my day, he said earnestly. After a few weeks of this routine, he finally asked me out, properly, no more beating around the bush. I figured, why not? Maybe it was time to take a chance on something, or someone, unexpected. After Ryan and I had been seeing each other for a while, he decided it was time for me to meet his parents. I wasn't exactly excited about the idea. I mean, his folks lived in one of those giant houses that looked like they belong in a magazine, more like a museum than a home. But Ryan was insistent, said it was important to him, so I agreed. The day came, and there I was, standing at the doorstep of this huge place, feeling like I'd stepped into another world. Ryan rang the bell, and his mother opened the door. The first thing I noticed was her expression, like she just smelled something bad. Ryan, darling, she said, air-kissing him before turning her eyes on me. And you must be Maya. Nice to meet you, ma'am, I said, extending my hand like I was taught. She barely touched my hand, like she was afraid I might rub off on her or something. Yes, well, come in, she said. We stepped into their foyer. Yeah, they had a foyer. And she led us through to the living room where his dad was waiting. Mr. Winters was a big guy with a loud voice and a handshake that nearly crushed my fingers. Maya, heard a lot about you. All good, he boomed, making me feel a bit more welcome than Mrs. Winters had. Thank you, sir. It's nice to finally meet you, I managed to say. We all sat down, and that's when the real fun began. Mrs. Winters was all about the subtle digs. So, Maya, Ryan tells us you work at Joe's bar. Must be quite an environment. Yeah, it's great. I meet all sorts of interesting people, I said, trying to keep things friendly. And your family, are they from around here? Other side of town, I replied. My dad fixes cars and my mom's a secretary at the school. I see, she said, arching one eyebrow like she'd just figured me out. Mr. Winters jumped in, maybe sensing the tension. That's what's great about this country, right? Anyone can make it if they try. Maya's a fine example, isn't she? I appreciated his effort, but it felt like he was talking about some kind of experiment, not a person. Dinner was served, and it was some fancy stuff I couldn't even pronounce. We made small talk. Well, Ryan and his dad did most of it. Mrs. Winters kept watching me like a hawk, especially when I fumbled with a proper fork for the salad or whatever. Then, out of nowhere, she dropped the bomb. Ryan, darling, we really should consider your future. Marriage is not a decision to be taken lightly. Maya seems like a lovely girl, but you must think about compatibility. I choked on my water. Marriage? We hadn't even talked about that yet. Ryan's face turned red, and he glanced at me, his mouth opening and closing like he was searching for something safe to say. I was about ready to excuse myself, maybe fake a sudden illness or something, when Mr. Winters spoke up. Now, let's not get ahead of ourselves. They're young. They've got time to figure things out, right, Maya? Right, Mr. Winters. We're just taking things one step at a time, I said, giving him a grateful look. The evening dragged on after that. Ryan tried to smooth things over, talking up how well I was managing my finances, like he had to prove I wasn't just some gold digger. It was weird and uncomfortable, and by the time we left, I was exhausted. Despite the frosty dinner with his parents and all the subtle jabs from his mom, we figured we'd give this marriage thing a shot. I wanted something small, maybe just close family and a few friends at a local church. But Ryan's dad, Mr. Winters, had other plans. Big plans. A week after we got engaged, he called us into their living room. Yeah, the museum one, and laid out his vision. Listen, this wedding isn't just a union of two hearts, okay? It's an opportunity, Mr. Winters began, spreading his arms like he was addressing a crowd. We'll have the press, state officials. It's going to be grand. I looked at Ryan, hoping he'd step in. He cleared his throat. Dad, Maya's not comfortable with comfortable. She'll be more than comfortable. Mr. Winters interrupted. I'm talking top-tier event planners, designer dresses, gourmet food. It'll be spectacular. He wasn't just planning a wedding, he was orchestrating a gala. The discussion, or more like a monologue, went on for hours. By the end, I felt steamrolled into agreeing. It wasn't our wedding anymore. It was a political campaign event. The big day arrived faster than I could have imagined, and it was everything Mr. Winters had promised and more. The venue was a massive estate with gardens that looked like they were tended by an army of landscapers. There were flowers everywhere, musicians, and a sea of guests I'd never met in my life. Most of them seemed to know more about Ryan's political family background than about us as a couple. The ceremony itself was a blur. I walked down the aisle feeling every eye on me, not with warmth, but with curiosity and scrutiny. When I reached Ryan, he gave me a reassuring grin. You okay? He whispered as we stood before the officiant. Yeah, just feels like we're actors in some play. I whispered back. Let's just get through this, he said, squeezing my hand. The reception was no less extravagant. Mr. Winters made sure to give a speech, mentioning how his son had married a wonderful, simple girl from our very own town, proving that our family values real hard-working Americans. I plastered a smile on my face, clapping along with everyone else, feeling like a prop in his political theater. Later, as we mingled among the guests, I overheard snippets of conversation. Great for his image. Such a smart move before the election. It was clear this wedding was less about us and more about them. After the whirlwind of the wedding, Ryan and I moved into the plush apartment his parents gave us as a wedding gift. It was fancier than anything I'd ever lived in, all sleek surfaces and designer furniture. It should have felt like a dream, but mostly it just felt cold. Ryan spent his days how he always did, out with friends, coming back late, sometimes not until the next morning. I tried to make the apartment feel like home, filling it with photos and little touches that reminded me of my old life. But every time Ryan's mom, Mrs. Winters, came over, she had something to say about my choices. One afternoon, she dropped by unannounced just as I was setting up some new curtains I'd bought. "Maya, really, those are what you chose. They're quite quaint," she said, wrinkling her nose like she smelled something bad. "I like them. They remind me of home," I replied, trying not to let her get to me. Well, it's your home too, I suppose, but remember, you're not just anyone now. You're a Winters. You have to think about appearances," she advised, her voice dripping with that condescending tone I'd come to dread. I bit my tongue and nodded silently. The conversation then shifted to Ryan's habits. "I hear he's been spending a lot of time at the club again. You really should keep a better eye on him, Maya. It's not becoming for a man of his position to be seen gallivanting about at all hours. I'm not his keeper, Mrs. Winters. He's a grown man. He makes his own choices." I shot back, a little sharper than I intended. She shook her head. "You might think that, dear, but part of being a good wife is guiding your husband, steering him away from temptations." The implication was clear, and it stung. Was she blaming me for Ryan's behavior? That night, when Ryan stumbled in well past midnight, I confronted him. "Your mom thinks I should be keeping you on a shorter leash, that it's my job to fix you," I said, frustration boiling over. Ryan, half drunk and bleary-eyed, just laughed. "Oh, come on, Maya. You know how she is. Just ignore her." "But I can't, Ryan. This is our life, and it's falling apart. You're out all the time, and when you are home, you're like this," I said, gesturing at him, my heart sinking as his laughter died down. He rubbed his face, looking tired. "Maya, I'm just trying to have a bit of fun. We're young, aren't we supposed to enjoy ourselves? It's not fun for me, watching you throw your life away, watching us become strangers," I admitted, the hurt clear in my voice. Ryan's expression softened, and he took a step toward me. "I'm sorry, babe. I didn't realize you felt that way. I'll try to do better, okay? Just give me some time." I wanted to believe him. Really, I did. But as the days turned into weeks, nothing changed. He made promises during the day and broke them at night. And Mrs. Winters' visits became more frequent, each one a reminder of how I was failing to live up to her expectations. One particularly rough day, I was back at Sam's pub and kitchen, picking up some shifts because, well, Ryan's idea of budgeting was blowing through whatever cash his parents handed him. It was mid-shift, the bar bustling with the usual crowd, when in walked Mrs. Winters with a gaggle of her high society friends. The moment I saw her, my stomach knotted. She caught my eye, a smug look crossing her face as if she'd just stepped into her own personal comedy show. They seated themselves in my section, of course. As I approached with a forced smile, Mrs. Winters waved me over with an impatient flick of her wrist. "Maya, dear, we're ready to order. Don't dawdle, we have an engagement afterward," she said loudly, probably for the benefit of her friends, who were already snickering into their menus. I nodded, taking out my notepad. "What can I get you ladies?" The orders were rattled off with a few unnecessary comments about the menu's simplicity, which I ignored. As they spoke, Mrs. Winters leaned in towards her friends, whispering just loud enough for me to catch bits about my poor son and Maya's little job. It made my cheeks burn, serving them, knowing they were mocking me. After placing their order at the bar, I overheard more of their chatter. And can you believe it? She convinces Ryan to spend all his money on drinks. "It's like she's running him into the ground on purpose," Mrs. Winters said, her voice dripping with fake concern. I clenched my fists, counted to 10, and returned to their table with a tray of drinks. Here you go, ladies. Anything else I can get you right now? Mrs. Winters looked me up and down. No, just try to be quick with the food, won't you? We wouldn't want to be late. The rest of their stay was a blur of backhanded compliments and rushed requests. By the time they left, I was seething but had to shake it off and finish my shift. Back at home, the tension didn't ease. Mr. Winters was ramping up for the final stretch of his campaign, which meant more events, more smiling, and more pretending. At each event, he paraded me around like a trophy. Here's my wonderful daughter-in-law, Maya, a true example of our family's commitment to real people, he'd say. Every compliment felt like a noose tightening around my neck. Smiling through these gatherings was getting harder, especially when all I wanted was to run out the door and never look back. One evening, I came home from a late shift to find Ryan sitting in the dark, his face buried in his hands. He looked up as I entered, and I could tell something was terribly wrong. His eyes were red, and he seemed to have aged years in just a few hours. Maya, I'm in trouble, he started, his voice shaky. Big trouble. I dropped my bag and sat down beside him. What's going on, Ryan? He took a deep breath, and then it all came pouring out. I've been gambling. It got out of hand, and now I owe a lot of money. I mean, a lot to some really bad people. My stomach turned. How much are we talking about? More than we can afford. A lot more. Over $100,000. He wouldn't meet my eyes. I felt a cold fear grip me. Ryan, what did you do? He broke down, sobbing. I thought I could win it back, fix it before anyone noticed, but I just dug deeper. They're threatening me now, Maya. They say if I don't pay up soon. He couldn't finish the sentence. Seeing him so vulnerable, so desperate, my anger gave way to a protective urge. Okay, let's think. We could tell your parents. No, we can't tell them. He grabbed my hand, pleading. Please, Maya, help me. I swear I'll fix this. I'll be better. I'll be the husband you deserve. Just help me get through this. The next day, I took out a loan in my name because his credit was a mess. Handing over that money to him was the hardest thing I'd ever done. He promised again to change, and for a while, it seemed like he actually might. Ryan started coming home earlier, helping around the apartment, even doing dishes and laundry without me having to ask. We spent evenings together like a real couple, talking about our day, planning for a future that suddenly seemed possible. I started to let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, we could turn this around. 6 months later, I came home after another long night at work, the smell of the bar still clinging to my clothes. As I opened the door to our bedroom, the sight before me froze me in place. There was Ryan, passed out drunk on our bed, with not one but two blondes asleep next to him. Bottles and clothes were scattered everywhere. It was like a slap in the face, all the more painful because I had started to trust him again. Rage and betrayal churned inside me. I grabbed my phone and started recording. I needed evidence, not just for myself, but for any legal battles that might come. I shook him awake, my voice ice cold. Ryan, who the hell are these girls? He blinked at me, confused and still half drunk. What? Oh, they're just friends. We were just having some fun. Friends? This is fun. I was nearly screaming now, the phone still recording. In our bed. He tried to wave it off, mumbling. Come on, Maya, it's not a big deal. We're just messing around. That was it. I'd had enough. I left the room and called his father, Mr. Winters. When he answered, I was blunt. Your son has crossed the line, Mr. Winters. I just found him in bed with other women. I've recorded everything, and I'm filing for divorce. No sooner had I ended the call than Mr. Winters was at our apartment, his face a storm of anger and worry. He burst through the door like a hurricane, zeroing in on Ryan, who looked like he hadn't slept at all. What the hell were you thinking, Ryan? Mr. Winters roared as soon as he laid eyes on his son. The walls might as well have shaken from his fury. "Dad, Ryan started, but Mr. Winters cut him off. "No, I don't want to hear your excuses. You've gone too far this time. Your reckless behavior isn't just destroying your marriage, it's threatening everything I've worked for." His voice filled the room, and it was clear this was about more than just family. It was about his career, his image, all of it hanging by a thread. Turning to me, Mr. Winters' tone softened, but the urgency remained. "Maya, I'm deeply sorry for all of this. I know an apology can't undo the hurt, but I'm prepared to make things right." He then laid out his plan. "I'm going to sell this apartment and give you the money from the sale as compensation. It's the least I can do. In return, I need you to keep this quiet, especially from the press." I nodded, still in shock, barely processing the speed at which things were moving. "Okay, I understand. And the divorce," he added, almost pleadingly. "Keep that quiet too, especially from my wife. You know how she is with gossip. I won't say a word," I assured him, feeling the weight of the situation. This wasn't just about me and Ryan anymore. It was about keeping up appearances, at least for now. "Good," he said, turning back to Ryan, who had been silently listening. "You're going to take a trip. A long one. Consider it a business trip. Clear your head and stay out of the public eye." Ryan looked defeated, nodding slowly without a word. It was clear he had no fight left in him, crushed under the dual weight of his father's authority and his own guilt. The next few weeks were a blur of lawyers, quiet conversations, and discreet moves. The apartment sold quickly, and true to his word, Mr. Winters handed over $600,000 to me. He also settled the loan I had taken out to bail Ryan out, clearing all my financial ties to him. With the money, I made a fresh start. I moved to another city, far enough to feel like a clean slate, but not so far that I felt lost. I bought a small, cozy apartment in a leafy neighborhood, a place that felt like it could be a true home. I even got myself a new car, nothing fancy, but something that symbolized my newfound independence. As I settled into my new life, I took one more crucial step. I blocked every number associated with the Winters. It was the final cord cut, the last goodbye to a chapter of my life that needed to close for good. I settled into my job as an administrator at a cozy downtown restaurant, where the pace was steady, but nothing like the frenetic energy of Joe's Bar and Grill. It gave me a sense of stability and routine, something I hadn't really had before. Exactly 2 years to the day since I'd left, my past decided to make an unexpected reappearance. My phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. Curiosity got the better of me, so I answered. "Maya, you need to keep better tabs on your husband." The voice was shrill, unmistakable even after all this time. "Mrs. Winters." I pulled the phone slightly away from my ear, taken aback by her tone. "Excuse me. Ryan is in trouble, and it's all because you can't seem to do your job as a wife," she accused, her voice frantic. I took a deep breath, the shock quickly fading into annoyance. "Mrs. Winters, what are you talking about? Slow down." She huffed into the phone. "One of Ryan's friends called me. He's gotten himself into a mess. Hit a policeman, if you can believe it. They needed money to keep it quiet, so I sent it. Now, why weren't you watching him?" I almost laughed at the absurdity. "Mrs. Winters, Ryan and I are divorced. We've been for 2 years now. I have no idea what he's been up to, nor is it my concern." There was a pause, then. "Divorced? Why doesn't anyone tell me anything?" "Maybe because it's none of your business," I said, my patience wearing thin. "And as for the money, Mrs. Winters, it sounds like you've been scammed. Ryan hitting a policeman and needing money sent in a hurry. Doesn't that sound strange to you?" She started to sob, her cries piercing through the phone. What am I going to do? I took the money from Richard's savings to pay them off. He will be furious if he finds out. That's something you'll have to sort out with him. I said, my tone firm. "I'm really sorry you're in this situation, but there's nothing I can do to help you." "But Maya," I hope you figure things out, Mrs. Winters. Goodbye. I hung up before she could say anything else and blocked the number immediately after. Leaning back in my chair, I let out a long breath. The call had shaken me, bringing back memories I'd rather forget. But it also made me realize just how far I'd come from the chaos of my life with Ryan and his family. Here I was in a home I loved, with a job that fulfilled me, far removed from the manipulations and drama of the Winters. I got up and walked over to the window, looking out at the quiet street below. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow over everything, and I felt a profound sense of peace. For the first time in a long time, I felt completely detached from that old life. I was free, truly free. And as I turned back from the window to go about the rest of my day, a smile spread across my face.
My mom's friend always seems to find an excuse not to pay for the meals she invites me to. She'll suggest we go out, but then she leaves without paying, acting like it's no big deal. Over time, I've ended up being the one who always forks out the money. One day, she invited me to stay at a hotel, and then casually dropped the bomb that I needed to pay $1,500. I was totally baffled and asked her what on earth she was talking about. She'd insisted that I foot the bill for our lodging. It was such an unreasonable demand that I'm still in shock. But I've decided it's time to set things straight and make her face reality. My name is Michelle. I'm 45 years old, and I work in an office. I live with my husband of 18 years, along with our daughter, who's in middle school, and our son, who's in elementary school. Since both my husband and I have jobs, we split the household chores. We help each other out. Whoever has some free time does the dishes, and we work together to manage our daily routines. My husband is really involved with our kids, driving our daughter to her sports activities and playing catch with our son. He's an amazing father, and I'm grateful to have such a thoughtful husband and adorable children to spend time with. One day, someone disrupted my peaceful routine. While I was taking out the trash, my neighbor and fellow mom, Susan, approached me with an invitation for coffee. "Good morning. How about coffee sometime?" she asked cheerfully. I responded with a non-committal, "Oh, coffee." She explained that there was a new cafe nearby known for its delicious Korean bread. Despite my hesitation, Susan seemed eager to go. Susan, a mom of my daughter's classmate, hadn't interacted with me much before, but we'd had some recent interactions. She suggested going on Saturday, noting that my daughter had sports and my son had plans with friends, so it wouldn't interfere with family time. I was surprised that she knew my children's schedules and asked how she knew. She casually mentioned hearing about it from David, who's in the same sports activities as my daughter, and that my son had mentioned his plans. Feeling somewhat cornered by Susan's good mood and her knowledge of my kids' schedules, I reluctantly agreed to Saturday. She left after setting the date and meeting place, and I found myself committed to going to the cafe. When Saturday arrived, I wasn't feeling great after working overtime, but we had plans to meet at the station. Susan was nowhere to be seen even 10 minutes later, but then I spotted her waving from a distance, looking cheerful. "Oh, it's a bit chilly today," she remarked, without offering any apology for being late. She chatted all the way from the station to the cafe. When we arrived, there was an unexpectedly long line, even though the cafe had only been open for an hour. "Oh my, lots of young people," Susan commented. Most of the other customers were indeed young. I suggested going to another place because of the long wait, but Susan stubbornly refused, saying, "No, I want to try this bread." We waited in line for an hour before finally being seated. Guided by the staff, I felt tired. "Michelle, you should have gotten the drinks ready," Susan said, holding back my frustration. I smiled and apologized. Sorry for not being more thoughtful. The bread at the cafe that Susan had strongly recommended turned out to be delicious, and I felt very satisfied. I even thought about coming back with my family next time. As we were getting ready to leave, Susan suddenly excused herself, saying she needed to use the restroom, and hurried off. After waiting for another 5 minutes and feeling the stares of people in the waiting line, I decided to pay the bill. Another 10 minutes passed before Susan finally emerged from the shop, apologizing for keeping me waiting and mentioning that her stomach had been hurting a little. I asked about her condition, and she assured me she was fine now, walking ahead of me. Just as I started to speak, Susan cut me off, asking if I was thirsty and insisting that I pick something to drink. Despite my attempts to decline, she pushed me to choose, and I ended up picking some tea. "It's on me, enjoy your drink," she said, sounding smug. I thanked her, but I couldn't shake the feeling that she was trying to cover the cost of the coffee and bread. I didn't feel comfortable explicitly asking her to pay, as it seemed awkward. Normally, wouldn't you ask the person how much it was? Feeling a bit uneasy, we arrived at the station before I realized it. Susan quickly said she had something to do and headed home. Since then, every time I was invited for tea by Susan, she would conveniently ditch the bill. Not only that, but she seemed to be gathering information about my family's activities from other people. Meanwhile, she would leave her kids with her in-laws on weekends and go out with friends, rarely being at home. Lately, she had even started leaving her kids with us to go out drinking on weekday nights. She would check when we would be home, bringing her child over before dinner, casually saying, "Oh, is it near dinner time? Well then, please take care of my child too." The child seemed happy to eat with us, feeling like siblings, but it wasn't the same for us adults. One time, I asked if her husband was home, to which she replied that he was often on business trips, so he wasn't there at the moment. "Take care, okay," she said as she left. It seemed her husband's absence was frequent due to work. "Hold on, I thought at least pay for the food, please." Honestly, with 2 grown children, the cost of food could be quite a burden. "It doesn't make much difference with just 2 more," Susan said before leaving, but any homemaker should understand that. A month had passed since we started living this way, and the kids were on summer vacation. On the way home, Susan from the neighborhood invited us to go out with our families. What should we do? On his way home from work, my husband had been approached by Susan. Since Susan's husband would be home, she invited us to go out during the holiday. If it's with the family, it's probably fine. If her husband is there, it shouldn't be a problem, right? With some apprehension, I considered the situation. "I don't know, but the kids seem to be on board," my husband remarked. Apparently, he had already discussed it with them, and they were excited. "It depends on you and my schedule," he added. I was dumbfounded by Susan's strong-arm tactics and couldn't find the words to object. "If the kids are looking forward to it, we have no choice," I reluctantly agreed. I contacted Susan and we arranged the time and place. Finally, the day arrived. As we gathered, I couldn't help but notice Susan's husband was missing. Unfortunately, he had to leave on a sudden business trip. It seems Susan's family wouldn't be joining us, just her and her 2 children. We decided to follow behind in separate cars. Arriving at the rental campground with fully equipped facilities, including cottages, we prepared for an overnight stay. While setting up the barbecue, the kids were already playing. Once everything was ready, we started grilling the meat. We had reserved food for 10, expecting Susan's family to join. Since her husband wasn't there, we had 3 extra servings. I worried we might have too much. Breakfast is always a favorite for the kids during the summer break, but planning lunch and dinner can be a hassle. We chatted casually while Susan just sat there. "That's why today we're just grilling meat, easy peasy," I remarked as my husband and I busily prepared and grilled the meat. As Susan sits there with a cool expression on her face, she comments, "We have to watch the kids properly after all." But she only observes them from afar. When I call the children to eat the grilled meat, she reaches out and takes it, exclaiming, "Wow, that looks delicious." My children and I are surprised, and Susan suddenly realizes her mistake, saying, "Oh, is this for the children? I was thinking of giving it to them first, but it's fine since we're grilling more." The children look disappointed, but Susan just laughs it off, saying, "You better eat quickly or I'll eat it all up." My husband and the kids are taken aback by her behavior. Susan proceeds to eat even more meat than the growing children. We had planned 1 lamb chop per person, but she has already had 4 and is reaching for more. "Susan, you've reserved only 1 lamb chop per person. You've already eaten 2 extra ones for yourself and your husband, so please eat something else," I tell her, hoping she'll understand. It might seem like a trivial matter, but there's no substitute food because it's by reservation. "What? There are restrictions on what I can eat? That's stingy," Susan complained. I replied, "Didn't you check when you made the reservation?" She should have known exactly what and how much was available since we decided on it together during planning, and we talked about ordering more because we have growing children. Susan insisted, "I don't eat much, I have a small appetite. Just think of me as not there, and 1 extra portion should be fine with my children who eat well and the men around." I thought it would be safe to order for 10 people. We had 2 middle school children who could eat 2 portions each and 1 elementary school child who could eat 2 portions, so there shouldn't have been any problem with the amount. However, the meat was disappearing quickly. "Mom, I want to eat that meat," my son said, reaching for it, only to have Susan snatch it and eat it quickly. I was angry, but my usually mild-mannered husband was starting to show his irritation as well. The reason we couldn't strongly object was that Susan's children were also there. "Mom, don't act like a child," said Susan's daughter. "What are you talking about? Camping is all about survival, and survival means fighting over meat." The children seemed dumbfounded by Susan's childish behavior. Afterward, we finished the barbecue, played outside for a while, and then decided to take a break. The cottages were separate, so we could get away from Susan and catch our breath. It was supposed to be fun, but the tension was palpable. My husband looked tired, and I agreed, suggesting we eat breakfast and head home early the next day. We spent the rest of the time relaxing with the family and greeted the morning. "Good morning." Susan came out of her cottage cheerfully. "You're lively this morning," I replied. "Of course, I ate a lot and relaxed." "I had a great time," she said. For breakfast, we ate the provided sandwiches, played a little more, and then started preparing to leave. During the final payment, Susan was nowhere to be found. "Susan's not here," I told my husband, and we looked around, but her children were also missing. "Hey, where's Susan and her kids?" I asked the children if they had seen her, and they said they were going to the restroom. As we waited for Susan to return and settle the payment, I asked the cashier to wait a little longer. After waiting for another 10 minutes, Susan still hadn't returned. "Isn't this taking too long?" my husband asked, looking concerned. I decided to check the restroom, but Susan and her children were nowhere to be found. Furthermore, her car, which should have been parked nearby, was gone too. I couldn't believe it. I felt a surge of anger building up inside me. How could she invite us and then run away without paying? It was infuriating. The total cost of the camping equipment, cottage accommodation, drinks, meat, and everything else came close to $900. Susan had confirmed the approximate amount at the time of reservation, and she had been the one who chose the place. She had rejected all the places I suggested and insisted that this particular place was perfect. Choosing a location that only allowed on-site payment now seemed like a premeditated act. We decided to head straight to Susan's house. "Susan, please open up." I rang the doorbell several times until Susan reluctantly opened the door. "Susan, why did you leave without saying anything?" I questioned, feeling frustrated. "Huh? Didn't I say I was leaving?" She pretended not to know. "Susan, you have to pay on the spot. Hand over the money," I told her, a bit forcefully. "Oh, I forgot, but I don't have any money right now," Susan replied, appearing indifferent to the situation. "We confirmed the amount in advance, didn't we?" "You were the one who set the budget, Susan." I finally spoke up, unable to keep quiet any longer. Susan kept insisting she had no money, so I asked her what was going on. "I bought something I wanted before the camping trip. Look," she said, laughing and showing off her recent purchase. "So you didn't have any money during the camping trip?" I asked, getting irritated. But Susan continued to laugh without feeling sorry at all. "Yeah, I didn't have it when I reserved, so what?" she replied casually. I was fed up with Susan, who seemed to have planned this from the beginning. "You planned this from the beginning," I accused her. "Well, thanks to me inviting you, we had a great time. It's a win-win situation, isn't it?" Susan retorted, showing no remorse. I confirmed one last time. "So you have no intention of paying?" Susan brushed off my persistence, saying, "It's embarrassing how persistent you are. I told you I don't have the money. When I get it, I'll pay you back. Or are you trying to squeeze money out of someone who doesn't have any?" With no shame and an unapologetic attitude, Susan laughed, and I reached my breaking point. "I see, understood," I said, deciding to go home without saying anything more. I discussed the situation with my husband, and time passed. Susan suggested going to a tasty restaurant nearby, acting as if the past incident never happened. "I'm sorry, I'm busy, so I'll have to pass," I replied, turning down Susan's invitations for the past few months, losing patience. Susan approached me with an angry look, asking, "Hey, are you avoiding me? You're still holding a grudge over the camping thing. A few hundred or a few $1,000s, so what? I can't believe you'd avoid someone over that, even if it were several tens of thousands." Susan ranted, infuriated and talking fast. "That's so, Susan. Let's go to an inn next time, I suggested, trying to diffuse the tension. Huh? Oh, sure, you planned it. In that case, I'll have to coordinate with my family, Susan replied, becoming cheerful. I told her my husband had given me some alone time and was thinking of going on a 2-night trip. When she asked if my husband would mind taking care of the kids, I declined, saying he was busy. To the hesitant Susan, I said, I plan to stay for 2 nights from Friday. If it's difficult, I'll go alone. Susan suggested leaving her kids with her husband's parents and joining me on the trip. When I showed Susan the exterior of the inn, she became even more delighted. I'll book 2 rooms. There seems to be a spot in all, I informed her. Excitedly, Susan started looking up various things on her own. How about I invite my friends too, she suggested, so I agreed to make all the reservations at once. A month later, the day of the inn reservation arrived. Susan and her friends were at my house, looking puzzled at me. Aren't you going to drive us? Susan asked. Sorry, I have to stop by my in-laws, so let's go separately, I said. Susan reluctantly agreed, and we headed to the inn in different cars. Wow, I can't believe we're staying at such a lovely inn, Michelle. Thank you, everyone exclaimed, amazed at the magnificence of the inn. Let's enjoy our free time then, I suggested. Susan and her friends seemed to be having a great time, seemingly forgetting about me. The first day was filled with eating, bathing, and sleeping. After the bath, I ran into Susan and her friends having a huddled conversation. Hey Susan, are you sure about staying at such an expensive inn? Can you afford it? One of Susan's friends asked. Yes, it's all on me, Susan boasted. Amazing. It's over $1,000 per person per night. So generous. Another friend exclaimed. In that case, I'll turn off notifications for texts and calls and spend time in his dream world until we leave the hotel, Susan declared. Susan said she would pay for her 5 friends lodging in full, and everyone was getting excited. The morning of the second day, they went to the spa for massages and were able to spend meaningful time healing their everyday fatigue. I tried texting Susan, but she didn't read or reply to my messages. Even by nightfall, there was no response. Hello, Michelle, it's morning already. Cheerful Susan called out. Yes, that's right, I replied, wondering why I was stating the obvious. You overslept, so it's your fault, right? We're going home first, so pay $155,000, Susan said, catching me off guard. Huh? Overslept? $155,000? What are you talking about? I didn't understand her sudden demand. The last one always pays, right? Susan insisted. Yeah, I'm already home though. Didn't you see my text? I had informed Susan via text that I was going home. Oh, I wouldn't be looking at my phone in such a fabulous, unreal place, Susan explained. I clarified the situation, telling her I went home on a second night because my mother-in-law wasn't feeling well. Originally, I was only going to pick up the children and husband, who were out playing, but I decided to leave early. Why didn't you say something? Susan was angry. I explained that my husband contacted me late, so I texted her. She then asked, what about the bill? Thinking she was mad about me going home without paying my share, I reassured her, saying, don't worry, I've already paid. Oh right, that's fine then. We just have to return the keys at the front desk and go home, Susan said, her tone returning to calm. Well, yes, since it's on-site payment, please stop by the front desk. My part has been properly deducted. If the front desk handled everything properly, there shouldn't be a problem, I explained. You didn't pay, right? Susan asked again. Yes, I paid my part before I left, so it's okay, I replied, hoping to clear up any misunderstanding. However, Susan's next words made me uneasy. What about our part? With this question, I was sure that Susan intended to make me pay. Please pay for yourselves, I heard. After the bath, I reminded Susan, you were going to pay for your friends, right? Oh well, Susan stammered. You were amazing. Honestly, I thought you were the worst kind of person for always disappearing when it's time to pay. So you really were going to pay back the money for the camp later. I misunderstood you, Susan. I'm sorry, I joked, trying to ease the tension. Wait a minute. I cut off Susan's protest and continued, tell me all about your wonderful time when you get back. See you later, and I hung up the phone. When I got home, my worried husband asked, are you okay? But I smiled and said, yeah, I'm fine. Later, Susan, who had invited her friends by saying she would pay, somehow managed to settle the bill using multiple credit cards. When Susan returned, her complexion was very bad, unlike the last time I saw her at the inn. "I never intended to pay," she screamed as she went home. According to what the children heard from Susan's children, her husband, who had returned from a business trip, scolded her terribly. "You have to earn and pay that large amount of $155,000 yourself," he said. Susan seemed to have started working part-time. For someone who had been leading a sloppy life, leaving housework and childcare to others, it must be a very tough time. She seems to be working so hard that she has no time to rest, both physically and mentally. I no longer receive invitations to play from Susan, nor do I have to look after her children. I've been able to regain a peaceful daily life. On holidays, I can spend time leisurely with my family, and I'm very happy.
My name is Mia Yates. I'm 23 years old, and I work from home. I have an older brother who's 5 years older than me, and he's currently engaged to Natalie, who's 26. Natalie's quite different from me. She's outgoing and easily makes friends, while I'm not so great at socializing. Natalie's become close to our parents and often visits us without giving a heads up. Today was no exception. When she arrived, my mom welcomed her warmly. Natalie walked in, greeted my mom, and then noticed me with a puzzled expression. "You're still at home, Maya," she said without even saying hello. "I'm working from home," I replied. "Enough with that. You need to get a job," she retorted. I couldn't argue, so I just went back to my workspace. My room is like my sanctuary. It's soundproof, and I designed it myself, paying for all the modifications. I keep it locked, not letting anyone in. To enter, you have to unlock the soundproof door and then open another door inside. Feeling frustrated, I vented in my room, shouting until I felt better. Around lunchtime, the light bulb in my room blinked, signaling it's time to eat. I headed to the living room where lunch was ready. My mom suggested we eat together, so I sat down, but Natalie looked displeased. "You get hungry even though you don't work. Ever think about helping out?" she said, calling me a parasite. I stayed quiet, listening to her complaints. When my parents started eating, I joined in. Natalie wasn't happy that my parents didn't scold me for not working. "You two are too lenient with Mia. I can't marry into a family like this," she said angrily. My parents reassured her, but she kept expressing her concerns, assuming I'd always depend on others. Feeling hurt, I stopped eating and kept my head down. My mom tried to reassure Natalie, saying I do work, but Natalie seemed unconvinced. Natalie wouldn't let up. She looked at me, noting my appearance with my hair braided, thick glasses, and always wearing sweats. She couldn't believe I was actually working, looking like that. Frustrated, I tried to explain softly that appearance doesn't dictate one's work, but this only seemed to make her angrier. "What kind of job do you do then? Say it," she demanded, glaring at me. I was too scared to respond. It was my mother who stepped in, saying that only our family knows about my job, and we couldn't discuss it right then. Hearing this, Natalie stood up and stormed off, questioning if she even belonged in our family. I felt bad for causing a scene, but my father reassured me not to worry and encouraged me to do what I love. Feeling relieved, I continued with dinner. Over the meal, I suggested that after my brother's wedding, I would tell Natalie about my job. My parents seemed to agree that it might be a good idea. After lunch, I got back to work. In the evening, I went grocery shopping with my mom while my dad tended to the garden. When we returned, we found Natalie in tears with my father comforting her. Concerned, my mom asked Natalie what was wrong. She couldn't speak, just sobbed harder. Seeing my father's troubled expression, I asked him what happened. He heard a loud noise from inside the house while he was in the garden and rushed to investigate. He pointed to a crowbar and hammer on the table. I instantly realized it was my room and ran towards it. The door was badly damaged, as if someone had tried to force it open. I was frozen with shock and fear. My father contacted my brother, who lived in a company dorm, and he promised to rush over after work. I decided to stay in my room until he arrived, trying to calm down. Once settled, I called my company and got permission to inform Natalie about my job after her marriage to my brother. When the room light flickered, I assumed my brother had arrived. When I left my room, I was surprised to see him already at the door. Apologizing for startling me, he said he would replace the damaged door himself, but I insisted that Natalie should compensate for it. Taking my hand, my brother led me to the living room where Natalie and my parents were. He addressed Natalie, expressing his shock at her actions, and demanded she apologize properly and compensate for the door. Natalie tearfully apologized to my brother, but he made it clear that the apology was for me, not him. Despite me saying it was okay, my brother continued to glare at Natalie. She then turned to me, knelt down, and apologized. Accepting her apology, I decided to move past the incident, but I wanted to understand why she did it. When I asked, Natalie explained that she thought if I didn't have a place to hide, I would be forced to work. Her words troubled me, making me wonder if I should tell her about my job before the wedding. However, revealing the nature of my job would go against company policy, so I chose to keep quiet about it for the time being. The tense atmosphere between my brother and Natalie bothered me, so I decided to lighten the mood by bringing out 2 live concert tickets from my room and giving one to each of them. Natalie was thrilled when she saw the tickets were for an Ames concert and turned bright red with excitement. She eagerly suggested to my brother that they go together. My brother was surprised, knowing how hard it is to get these tickets, but I assured him that I happened to acquire them and they could use them as a peace offering if they wanted. Both Natalie and my brother looked delighted, and seeing them happy made me feel joyful too. The good vibes returned, and everyone was able to forget about the damaged door and enjoy their meal. On the day of the concert, while I was out, Natalie excitedly visited my house to express her gratitude to me. Since I wasn't home, she told my parents, "Enjoy." Finally, Mia has decided to work outside and seemed genuinely happy about it. After the concert, my brother called me, thrilled about how great it was. He mentioned that Natalie is actually a huge fan of Ames and had always wanted to secure the once-in-a-year concert tickets. She was extremely excited to fulfill this long-time wish at the concert. On the way home, Natalie seemed elated, describing the experience as adorable, beautiful, and praising the songs and lyrics. When I mentioned I was glad we made up, my brother told me the soundproof door we paid for as compensation cost $7,000, to which I casually responded that it sounded about right. He was surprised at the expense, but I explained that since it was a soundproof room, all the components were pricey, which astonished him even more. Natalie was said to have mentioned that the expense hurt, but the concert made up for it. As for me, knowing my brother and his friends were getting along well made me feel really good about giving them the tickets. Natalie, still not understanding my work-from-home job, mistakenly thought I started working outside after the concert and was pleased. When she realized her mistake, she began calling and visiting my house daily, urging me to get a job before the wedding. I hoped to endure it until the ceremony, but things only escalated. Even if I didn't want to see her until then, Natalie frequently summoned me from my room to the living room, where she nagged me about getting a job before the wedding and not wanting a jobless NEET in the family. To distract her, I gave her merchandise like mascots and file cases I received from my previous company. Initially, she accepted her favorite AIM goods without question, but eventually, she started to wonder why I had so much AIM merchandise. Reluctantly, I told her a friend who works with AIM Company gives them to me. Hearing this, she smiled and asked for more tickets next time. However, she continued to demand more merchandise and started causing trouble by insisting on being allowed into my room. I managed to stop her a few times, but I was worried she might break the door again. So I mustered up the courage to give her a stern warning, saying if she broke the door again, she would be the one paying for it this time. Natalie's face turned pale upon hearing this, making me wonder if she really was planning to do it again. All I could do was hope the wedding ceremony would be over soon so I could be free. Even then, until the wedding day, There was never a day when Natalie visited or the call light didn't flash. I lost count of how many times I shouted, "Enough already," in my room. I tried talking to my brother about it, but he seemed resigned, saying he'd told Natalie countless times that I was working. But she didn't seem to listen. I wished he'd get angry like when she broke my door, but he was busy with wedding preparations. Finally, the day before the wedding arrived, and it seemed our parents would spend the day together. So we had a fun night reminiscing and looking at old photo albums. I mentioned that when I get married, my brother would have his own family, so it would just be the three of us with our parents. On the day before the wedding, my brother assured me he'd spend the day alone with our parents, which I appreciated. In that calm moment, his phone rang, and it was Natalie calling. When he handed me the phone, she asked about a major announcement from AIM, but I wanted to enjoy my family time and didn't want to be bothered, so I brushed it off. My brother seemed to feel the same and turned off his phone. As our father reminded us to get up early, my brother bowed deeply and thanked our parents for taking care of him. Mom jokingly remarked that's what women do when they get married, which led to laughter, ending the night on a light note. Finally, the wedding day arrived. I informed my family that I'd be a little late in the morning, and they went ahead to the venue. When I arrived later, I went to the waiting room to congratulate Natalie. However, instead of the beautiful bride, I was met with a hostile demeanor. She accused me of ignoring her call about the AIM announcement and demanded to know why I hadn't gotten a job despite her repeated requests. She made it clear she didn't want people to think I was part of the family. When I tried to explain, she shut me down, insisting I leave. Feeling dejected, I retreated to a separate room reserved for me. There, I had my makeup and hair done by professionals and changed into the cocktail dress I'd bought for the wedding. Preparing for my brother's wedding, which I wouldn't be attending, was a bittersweet experience. Amidst the preparations, I received a call from my parents. I assured them that even though I wouldn't be physically present at the ceremony, I still intended to celebrate. As the wedding ceremony began without me, I decided to watch it on the venue's monitor to feel connected to the event. There was a moment when my brother looked around for me, and it nearly brought me to tears. However, I reminded myself that it was a day for celebration, not sorrow, and continued to watch and bless the occasion. After the entertainment segment, the female MC announced a special celebration video for the newlyweds. As the room darkened, a video started playing on the monitor. The image on the screen was of AIM, whom Natalie adored, delivering a congratulatory message. In a surprising twist, AIM revealed that she was actually me, Nia, congratulating my brother and Natalie on their marriage. Natalie looked stunned, and my brother seemed to realize the truth. I apologized for not disclosing my identity earlier and explained that I was leaving for overseas work, likely never to see them again. I urged Natalie to pretend we weren't family, ending my message with well wishes for their happiness. As the lights came back on, all eyes were on Natalie, who looked visibly shaken. Later, my brother informed me that after we left, Natalie broke down crying, regretting her actions. Apparently, she was now known as the bride who wasn't considered family by AIM, and my speech had gone viral on social media. I heard she couldn't even face her neighbors anymore due to the embarrassment. Hi, I'm Astrid, and I'm 34 years old. I spend my days taking care of our home and our two daughters. My husband, Ben, and I got married 7 years ago, and since then, we've built a family of 4. Our daughters, Maya and Millie, bring a lot of joy into our lives. Ben works hard and often gets home late, but he's a good provider for us, and I do my best to support him. Overall, our family life is pretty peaceful, but there's one big problem. My mother-in-law, Francine, she's what you might call a classic difficult mother-in-law. From the start of our marriage, she's made it clear she doesn't approve of me. She often criticizes my cooking, saying it needs more salt or broth. But I disagree. Adding more doesn't improve the taste, it just masks the flavor of the ingredients. But she didn't seem to care about my preferences at all. She'd add mayonnaise, sugar, salt, and whatever else she fancied into my dishes as if it were normal. If I cooked everything to her taste, it would be overpowering and I wouldn't enjoy it. This became a common occurrence whenever we visited my in-laws. From the very start of our marriage, she'd pester me about getting pregnant, almost like a broken record. Are you pregnant yet? When will I have a grandchild? She stopped asking after our first daughter was born, but after our second child, she started up again, this time with something even worse. She'd say things like, "Still no boy. When are you going to have your third child? If you don't give birth to a boy, you're worthless as my eldest son's wife. You're a useless wife if you can't give me a grandson." It was relentless and hurtful. I have finally reached my breaking point with Francine's hurtful comments. No matter what she said, she always ended it with, "If you don't give birth to a boy, your existence is just pointless." It was infuriating. I mean, how pathetic can you be to judge someone's worth based on the gender of their children? I have 2 wonderful daughters, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. I couldn't understand why Francine would say such terrible things to me. In what kind of backward thinking does she live, insisting that a baby had to be a boy? Children are precious regardless of their gender. These thoughts kept gnawing at me until I couldn't take it anymore. I finally opened up to my husband about the bullying. "I don't want to go to your parents' house anymore," I told him. To my relief, he understood. "Okay, you don't have to visit them anymore," he said. "But you should show up at least on Thanksgiving and New Year's." I agreed, though I really dreaded seeing Francine on those occasions. But as the eldest son, my husband felt obligated to attend, and I didn't want to make things harder for him. With this arrangement, I managed to minimize my interactions with my in-laws as much as possible. After some time, my husband started coming home much later than usual. Normally, he'd be back around 8 p.m. due to his work commitments, but recently it's been closer to 10 p.m. He claims it's because of overtime and work-related socializing. But I can't shake the feeling that something else might be going on. His late nights mean that my daughters hardly get to see him anymore. "Daddy's not coming home today either," they'd sadly remark. He says he's busy at work. It's heartbreaking to see them miss their father so much. That's why I finally decided to address the issue with my husband. One day, I mustered up the courage to ask my husband if he could come home early, even if just for a little while, because our daughters missed him dearly. But instead of understanding, he responded with irritation. "Who do you think I've been working this late for?" he snapped. "I'm not playing around. You've been too easy on yourself lately, haven't you? Even telling me about your issues with Mom." I was taken aback by his anger. All I wanted was for him to spend time with our daughters. Why did he have to react like this? Gradually, a divide started growing between us. Then, during Thanksgiving, I had to face Francine again, and she was as cruel as ever. Not only did she pick on me, but she also belittled her other daughter-in-laws, Lorna and Callie. She'd order us around, saying, "You all better get in the kitchen and start getting ready." And when she addressed my daughters, it was with dismissiveness, while showering her second son's son, Timmy, with praise. "Ha, Timmy, come over here." She'd say, "You're very important to me since you'll be our heir." It was clear discrimination. She treated Timmy as special because he was the grandson she wanted, while ignoring and marginalizing my daughters and the other daughter-in-laws. We formed a silent alliance, Lorna, Callie, and I, bonded by Francine's harassment. It's astonishing how Francine can switch her attitude so abruptly. I never imagined she presumed to decide that Timmy would be the heir without consulting me. It's beyond disrespectful. And you're right, it's not just Francine's behavior that's troubling. Our own husbands seem completely oblivious to the way their wives are being mistreated. They're off drinking and socializing while we're left to deal with the pressure from Francine. To make matters worse, Francine talks behind our backs to her relatives, spreading hurtful rumors and making outrageous comments like, "She really is a bad wife who can't get pregnant with a boy." It's appalling. Lorna, Callie, and I found solace in each other. We realized we were all going through similar struggles, and we leaned on each other for support. We promised to stand by one another, no matter what challenges came our way. As the months flew by, New Year's Day arrived, and Francine continued to boss us around, treating us like her servants. She'd rush us to bring out dishes and refill drinks promptly. Then she'd swoop in, holding my son, gushing about how adorable he was, and allowing all the relatives to hold him too. But things took a nasty turn when Francine, perhaps fueled by alcohol, started spewing hurtful comments loudly. "Why don't you leave your wife and get a new one then?" she exclaimed. Shockingly, my husband agreed, saying, "You're right, Mom. Maybe I don't need a wife like her." Their laughter echoed, joined by the other relatives, while we wives stood there in disbelief, feeling the weight of their cruelty. Then Francine went too far. She shoved divorce papers in my face, saying, "You should sign this already. I don't want you in this house anymore, and I don't want your granddaughters either. So you take them." It was a moment of utter betrayal and heartbreak. My husband stood there with a smirk on his face as Francine handed me the divorce papers. Feeling like I couldn't endure their cruelty any longer, I agreed to sign. To my surprise, my husband and I both completed the paperwork, and the divorce was finalized right there at the New Year's gathering. "Now I'll be able to live peacefully without any more hassle from you," Francine remarked, laughing alongside my husband. Feeling utterly alone, I decided to leave first. But before I could, Lorna and Callie rushed to my side, asking if I was okay. "I'm fine now," I assured them. "I'm leaving, but you two should find a way to escape too." As we exchanged these words, my sister-in-law Winona, who usually left early, suddenly spoke up. "I'm so happy for you, Astrid, that you got to divorce my terrible brother," she exclaimed. My husband's face turned pale. "How dare you say that to your own older brother?" he protested. But Winona wasn't backing down. "Shut up, you filthy cheater. I know everything. I know you're having an affair, Ben." The room fell silent, everyone frozen by Winona's accusation. My husband stammered, trying to deny it, but Winona was adamant. "We know," she insisted. "Don't embarrass your brother by denying it." The truth was out, and there was no going back. With a triumphant air, Winona presented incriminating photos of Ben with another woman to each relative's seat, shocking everyone in the room. "How did you even?" Ben stuttered, clearly caught off guard. "You're having an affair with a classmate of mine from high school," Winona revealed. "Another classmate saw you together and took these photos for me. Now you can't get away with this. With the divorce finalized, you must pay alimony and child support to Astrid, okay?" Ben vehemently denied it, but Winona's evidence was undeniable. Thanks to her unexpected intervention, I was granted a divorce, all because of Ben and his reckless actions. "Now is the time for you both to decide," Winona urged Lorna and Callie. "Even if Astrid gets divorced first like this, Mom will keep pressuring you both." Encouraged by Winona's courage, Lorna and Callie confronted their husbands. "I hate that our child was made hair without my consent," Lorna exclaimed. "And I hate that you agreed with your mother. I won't tolerate being controlled by her anymore. Let's get a divorce." "What divorce?" Callie's husband retorted. "If you don't like it, then cut ties with your family. If not, I'm taking Timmy with me, and you'll never see him again." Shocked by the ultimatum, Callie stood her ground. "I refuse to be bullied by your mother any longer. Either divorce me and stay with your family, or cut ties with them. You choose." The room fell silent, tension thick in the air as each couple faced an impossible decision. Amidst the unexpected chaos, the relatives hastily excused themselves, apologizing for the disturbance before swiftly departing. But Francine remained incensed by the upheaval. "What do you think you're both doing? I'll never allow you to get a divorce," she declared vehemently. "It's not up to you, Mom. It's their decision," Ben interjected firmly. Determined to break free from the toxic influence, I added, "And I'll cut ties with your family too. That's why I came here today." Feeling the weight of their wives' resolve, Lorna and Callie pressed their husbands to make a choice. Eventually, Ned and Steve, feeling the pressure, decided to sever ties with the family, Ned couldn't stand the thought of being separated from his son. But Steve made the difficult decision to cut ties with his family because he loved his wife deeply. In the end, Francine was left with only Ben, who was drowning in debt. I received a substantial amount of alimony from my ex-husband and his lover, who refused to marry him, citing her existing marriage. Ben's reputation suffered both personally and professionally, and he became a laughingstock with no chance of remarriage. As for Francine, the neighborhood gossip painted her as abandoned by her sons, a fate she seemingly brought upon herself. Seeing their downfall brought me immense satisfaction. I moved to the city, where my aunt offered me a job, and I started a new life there with my daughters. Winona, who also lived in the city, became a close confidant. We often met for drinks and arranged playdates for our children. For now, I decided to focus on work and providing for my daughters. Love can wait, but my daughter's well-being cannot. My husband Derek called me suddenly, sounding urgent. He sent a picture that left me stunned. Our family home, the one I grew up in, was being torn apart. My name's Kim, and I live with Derek and his mom Mary. I met Derek at work, but I quit after we got married to focus on homemaking. Turns out, Derek seemed sweet before we tied the knot. But he's really a mama's boy. Living with Mary brought out his true colors. He's always putting her first, even over me, his wife. Mary basically runs our household, making all the decisions about everything from decor to meals. I'm left doing all the chores like her servant. Derek doesn't seem to care how tired or unhappy I am. I'm starting to think I married him just to look after Mary. She's getting more arrogant by the day, never openly mean in front of Derek, but constantly making me feel small when we're alone. I can handle some of her insults and the silent treatment, but it's wearing me down. One day, Mary crossed a line. She called my freshly brewed coffee disgusting and splashed it in my face, almost burning me. That was it. I couldn't take it anymore. Tearfully, I told Derek everything when he got home, hoping for support. But he just shrugged it off, saying his mom was just in a bad mood. The next day, Mary was even worse, clearly having heard about our conversation. "How dare you tell my son about our little argument?" she sneered. Then she started attacking my parents, questioning my upbringing. It was too much. I couldn't stand her insults toward my loving parents any longer. I suggested to Derek that we live separately from Mary, but he refused, saying he couldn't disrespect his mom like that. So I made my decision. "Fine, then I'll move out," I said without hesitation. I didn't want to stay in a place ruled by Mary's taste any longer. I quickly filed for divorce and arranged a weekly apartment contract. It took some time to finalize everything, but I knew it was the right decision for my own sanity. The next morning, I left the divorce papers on the table and hurriedly left the house. I really didn't want to go back to my parents' home. I knew Derek might check there first if he came looking for me. I didn't want to cause unnecessary worry or trouble for my parents, so I rushed my move to avoid any further interference from Derek. Afterwards, I arranged a trip for my parents as a gift, using some savings I had from before I got married. My parents were hesitant, but I insisted and sent them on a trip to San Francisco. They deserved some enjoyment, especially since I hadn't been able to properly show my gratitude to them after getting married and always dealing with Mary and Derek. With my parents away, they wouldn't have to deal with Derek causing them any trouble, at least for a while. I was starting to adjust to my new life in the weekly apartment when Derek suddenly called. He had tried several times since I left, but I had ignored all his calls. Reluctantly, I answered the phone, wondering why Derek was calling now. To my surprise, he sounded cheerful, asking how I was. Cautiously, I replied, "What do you want?" He continued unapologetically, saying, "I'm having your family home demolished right now." I fell silent, not understanding what he meant. Demolished? Did you say demolished, like destroying? What on earth are you talking about? "Don't mess with me," I retorted, still not grasping the meaning of his words. He remained nonchalant, saying, "Yeah, I'm selling the land your family home is on to buy my mom a luxurious house." His nonsensical statements left me speechless. With a smug tone, he added, "We're married, so it's shared property, right?" Then he hung up the phone, leaving only the cold electronic disconnected tone. I couldn't believe the ridiculous logic he was using. It sounded like something out of a science fiction movie. I couldn't tell if it was a prank or if he was serious, so all I could do was stare at my silent phone. Then, a notification popped up, a picture from Derek. When I opened it, I saw a house being torn down, its white walls and blue roof just like my family home. I felt the blood drain from my face. Furious, I tried calling him back, but he completely ignored me. Collapsing onto the floor, I couldn't help but feel overwhelmed. Later, I discovered what had transpired after I left. Derek, as expected, went to my parents' house, only to find out from a neighbor that they were on vacation. The neighbor also mentioned that I hadn't returned home. This news seemed to enrage Derek. He saw it as unfair that my parents were away while I was elsewhere. In a fit of anger, he decided to demolish the house as revenge. Sadly, neither my parents nor I were there to prevent it. Moreover, he hadn't submitted the divorce papers yet, assuming he could do whatever he wanted with my property since we were still legally married. I called my sister, who still lived at the family home, barely able to contain my worry. I couldn't fathom how Derek managed to do it, but if he forcefully demolished the house with her inside, I dreaded to think what could have happened to her. I anxiously waited for my sister to answer. After several rings, she picked up in a relaxed tone, asking what was wrong. Despite my urgency, her attitude remained unchanged, making me feel like I might be overreacting. I hurriedly asked about the house, but my sister's response was unexpected. "Oh, the house. Keith across the street seems to be having some renovation work done or something, but our house is fine." I couldn't believe it, but it had to be the explanation. After a moment of silence, it hit me. The house across the street from ours, where Keith, who had always been kind to us, lived, looked just like ours. Our last names were the same, leading to frequent mix-ups with Christmas cards and visitors. In other words, the house Derek claimed to have demolished was Keith's. I was struck with disbelief. Talking about it gave me a headache. Having our house destroyed would be terrible enough, but accidentally demolishing the neighbor's house was no laughing matter. I quickly explained the situation to my sister and rushed to our family home. Together, we headed to Keith's house. It appeared that Derek and the contractors had already left, leaving the house completely demolished. My sister and I turned pale as a man with an exotic appearance, dragging a suitcase, appeared while letting out a bizarre scream. "My house is gone." It was Keith, who had just returned from an overseas trip. His wide eyes mirrored our shock. Exchanging glances, my sister and I apologized profusely. We explained the situation in detail, but it all sounded like excuses. We couldn't help but feel sorry for involving him in all of this. "We're so sorry that your precious house ended up like this." We continued to apologize. We knew that saying sorry wasn't enough, but it was all we could do for now. Keith seemed shocked by the sudden turn of events. When we apologized, Keith lifted his face and spoke kindly, reassuring us, "It's not your fault. There's someone else who needs to take responsibility." Though his tone was gentle, his eyes held a serious demeanor. He suggested a plan to make things right. A few days later, Derek appeared in front of the demolished house with the contractors. I had called him there, taking a gamble on whether he would come or not. Perhaps he was intimidated by the formal protest, or maybe he just wanted to see my distressed face. Either way, he agreed to come. Accompanied by my sister, Keith, and a lawyer, I went to meet him. Derek seemed surprised to see me with allies, but he quickly put on a brave face. "What do you want now? Nothing can be done about the demolished house. Besides, it's our shared property as a married couple. You have no right to complain." Derek still didn't know the truth. Responding with a hint of pity, I told him, "The house you destroyed wasn't my family home. It was Keith's house." As I introduced Keith, Derek visibly shrank back, intimidated by Keith's anger, which was unusual for the typically gentle man. Derek tried to argue back, saying, "But your maiden name is Jackson, right? I checked properly before demolishing it." Hearing that he had demolished someone else's house, Derek started to panic. I sighed, as if to interrupt him, explaining, "It's not that unusual of a last name. We just happen to live in a similar house and have the same last name. But what are the odds?" Despite being genuinely upset, Derek's response sounded almost like a comedic retort in the midst of the tense situation. My sister chuckled beside me, finding the situation amusing. "This is hilarious," she remarked. Ignoring her, I continued, "Besides, do you even understand what shared property means? My family's land isn't part of our shared property. Maybe you should ask this lawyer here for some advice." At my signal, the lawyer handed Derek a business card. Derek seemed surprised, apparently not realizing he was a lawyer, and stared at the card. My sister leaned in, mockingly addressing Derek. "Don't you know Keith Jackson of our city? He's a famous landowner around here." Indeed, Keith was not just an ordinary man. As my sister later explained, he used to be an executive at the company where Derek worked, the same company where I met him. Sometimes Keith's eyes would lose their warmth, and his expressions carried an aura of influence. "It's not my fault." Derek finally seemed to realize the gravity of the situation. His previous boldness was replaced by a panicked demeanor. Unfortunately, the contractors, who should have been his only allies, fled as soon as they heard Keith's story. They were the kind who would demolish a house without proper investigation. Derek must have been caught by a fraudulent contractor. "Enough already?" Keith, seeming to have run out of patience, yelled at Derek. The air seemed to tremble with the force of his anger. "And make your wrongdoing without any excuses, or do you want to involve the police?" At these words, Derek became completely subdued. In the end, with a lawyer present, he agreed to our side's demands, and the situation was settled. Derek signed the divorce papers and was forced to write a letter stating that he would pay compensation to both Keith and me. The compensation amount was quite significant due to the demolition of the house, and Derek had already incurred debt for the demolition costs. The unscrupulous contractor had taken the money and disappeared without a trace, leaving Derek with no one to rely on and struggling to repay the debt. The fallout also affected Mary. She had thought she would live with Derek in the luxurious house, but when her son demolished the house of wealthy landowner Keith Jackson, she instantly became a target of ridicule. Naturally, she could not accept such a situation, and soon she found it difficult to leave her house. As for Keith, although his house was demolished, he hadn't suffered too much damage. The reason he had gone on an overseas trip was his daughter who lived abroad. He had received an international call from his son-in-law, saying that his daughter was about to give birth. Having lost his wife 20 years ago, Keith doted on his grandchild and decided to live abroad with his daughter, as she had previously consulted with him. So he intended to demolish the house and sell the land after selling his business. Of course, he was shocked because the house had disappeared sooner than expected, but he laughed, saying that the result was the same. I didn't inform my parents of anything until they returned from their San Francisco trip, because I didn't want to ruin their vacation. When they returned home and heard the whole story, they turned pale and were speechless. But they were relieved that nothing had happened to me. At my parents' suggestion, Keith stayed at our house until his business was settled. I also moved back to my parents' house from the weekly apartment, and we spent our time reminiscing about our memories with them, who would soon be unable to return to the U.S. for a while. About a month later, the day of Keith's departure finally arrived, and our family went to the airport to see him off. He was carrying a bunch of toys, and he seemed so excited to see his grandchild that he looked like he might start dancing. Although it was a time for goodbyes, his happiness was so infectious that we couldn't help but smile. We waved our hands as we watched him head towards the boarding gate. A few months later, we received several airmail letters from Keith, each containing photos. In every photo, he was holding his granddaughter, looking incredibly happy. My sister said, "They've been nagging us. They want to see their grandchild's face. It's definitely Keith's influence. I agreed. My sister and I had begun to hear our parents expressing their desire for a grandchild as well. Seeing Keith's happy face and the adorable photos of his granddaughter made me want to have a family of my own. But next time I get married, I vow to choose someone who isn't a mama's boy and who will genuinely cherish my family. After giving birth, I came back home from the hospital, but when I tried to use my key, it didn't work. "Oh, you got discharged today," my husband said casually. "I thought you weren't coming back, so I changed the locks. You can't get in anymore." At that moment, it hit me. We were already like strangers, and he had already started the divorce process. He blamed me, saying if I had apologized earlier, things wouldn't have escalated. He hung up, leaving me with my newborn and a useless key. Anger boiled inside me at how he treated me throughout our marriage. He probably expected me to beg for forgiveness and beg to be let back in. Maybe I would have in the past, but not anymore. He didn't deserve to be a husband or a father. Deciding I wouldn't let him off easily, I resolved to take action. My name is Natasha, a full-time homemaker, 3 months pregnant. I had to quit my job when I got pregnant, something my husband insisted on so I could focus on being a homemaker. While I was happy about the pregnancy, I was also confused. Getting pregnant just 3 months after marriage wasn't what I expected. I wanted to enjoy being newlyweds with my husband, and I always wanted siblings for myself. My husband was thrilled about the pregnancy, eagerly awaiting our baby's arrival every day. But amidst the happiness, there were many difficulties. Shortly after discovering my pregnancy, my morning sickness hit hard. It got so severe that I struggled to even sit up, let alone do any household chores. The house started to get messy, and I couldn't manage even simple tasks. While my husband didn't say anything directly, his dissatisfaction was evident. It seemed to start when I began sleeping early due to the sickness, missing his return from work. "I want the room cleaned up. There's too much dust," he complained one day, frustrated. "And I prefer homemade food over delivery all the time." We're newlyweds, but is this how it's going to be? His words stung, especially on his day off. Suppressing the urge to snap back, I smiled and explained, "I've been struggling with morning sickness since the beginning. I'd really appreciate your help." I hoped he'd understand, now that he was going to be a father soon. But his response disappointed me. "Pregnancy and childbirth are a mother's job," he said dismissively. "There's nothing I can do. You have to handle it until the baby is born." Feeling a mix of frustration and disappointment, I held back my retort, reminding myself that the baby could hear. Instead, I silently praised myself for keeping my cool. "Fathers can spoil the child once they're born," he added casually before leaving for lunch, leaving me alone with my thoughts. Lately, my husband has been going out to eat often and returning late without even bringing something back for me. I don't hate him. I married him because I love him. But he doesn't take care of himself, and when things don't go his way, he sulks like a child. For instance, before we got married, there were times I had to cancel our dates because of work. He'd get upset every time, and I'd try to cheer him up by treating him or comforting him. Even when he visited my place, he'd complain about things not being perfect, like the cleaning or the food. But back then, I could laugh it off. He'd even stay over for weeks without helping with any chores. Back then, maybe it was my maternal instincts kicking in or finding him charming. But I ended up marrying him. But as we started living together, I began to notice his flaws more and more. Despite seeing his negative side, I kept quiet, hoping things would improve once the baby arrived. But I was wrong. Before I knew it, I had drifted off, lost in thoughts about our situation. When I woke, it was already dark, and my husband still hadn't returned from lunch. I felt a mix of relief and emptiness as I glanced around the messy room. Thoughts of divorce crept into my mind. But then I'd think about our unborn child and wonder if that was the right decision. Overthinking left me feeling more depressed, unable to move. Days passed, and I remained lost in these thoughts, feeling increasingly uneasy. Then, while eating with my swollen belly, I suddenly felt water trickling down my legs. Could it be my water breaking? Panic set in and as I hurried inside to check. As I began to feel pains in my belly, despite it being a few days before my due date, fear gripped me, and I called my husband, who was still at work. Despite the pain of labor, my husband didn't show concern when I called him, scolding me for not sticking to the schedule. He had promised to leave work and be there when I went into labor, but now that wasn't happening. Deciding not to dwell on his absence, I focused on giving birth safely. Calling for an ambulance, I made it to the hospital. Even after arriving, the pain persisted. But eventually, I gave birth to our child. My mother and mother-in-law rushed over, praising me. But when my mother-in-law realized my husband still hadn't shown up, everyone began to worry. I, too, had forgotten about him amidst the chaos. Calling him, I asked him to come to meet our newborn. But instead of rushing to the hospital, he demanded an apology, blaming me for giving birth earlier than planned. He even accused me of ruining his schedule. He refused to come, citing work. His callous response crushed me, and I couldn't hold back tears. I explained the situation to my confused parents and in-laws, revealing his recent behavior. Anger flared among them, and my in-laws apologized, but my feelings towards my husband had already cooled completely. I'm considering divorcing him, I confided to my parents. Natasha, that's not something you need to apologize for. My mother reassured me. It's important to follow your heart. Relieved by their support, I still felt guilty for my baby. Tears flowed once again as I cried through the night after everyone left. As I tried to navigate breastfeeding and caring for my newborn, alone in the room, my mother-in-law paid me a visit. After cooing over her grandchild, she began to share details about my husband's childhood. Growing up as a latchkey kid, my husband faced loneliness at home while his parents worked. Though they taught him to be independent, he struggled with the solitude, often crying and causing trouble for his parents. They had to rely on relatives and friends to care for him until they could pick him up. Despite their efforts to encourage independence, he resisted, refusing to heat up his own food or be left alone. Eventually, they sent him to cram school, hoping it would lessen his time alone at home. However, even after being sent to cram school, my husband still resisted the idea of coming home alone. Instead of preparing meals himself, he used pocket money to buy food before and after cram school. When his parents picked him up, he expected them to cook for him. He had been living selfishly, avoiding housework and relying on his parents' care. He admitted, "I hate being alone because I can't do anything on my own." He chose his university and workplace based on their proximity to home, further relying on others. My mother-in-law, feeling sorry for the situation, confessed that they had raised him wrongly. She hoped he would change after marriage and becoming a father, but he hadn't. Feeling strangely in agreement, I realized I hadn't discussed our situation with my in-laws. Unintentionally, I opened up to my mother-in-law about it. Later that night, while trying to rest between nursing sessions, my husband called accusing me of talking to his parents to get back at him for not visiting. Angered by his response, I muttered insults silently, finding solace in my sleeping baby as I eventually drifted off to sleep. As I left the hospital, my husband still hadn't visited our baby even once. Despite feeling a sense of relief, I couldn't shake the strange refreshment as I took a taxi home. To my surprise, the taxi driver helped me with my luggage and accompanied me to the door. As we chatted, I attempted to unlock the door, but the key wouldn't fit. It seemed the cylinder had been changed. Only my husband could have done this. Suppressing my anger, I called him, and this is what he said. "Oh, you got discharged today, but this isn't your home anymore. This is my house, and you and I are already strangers. I've already filed for divorce. If you had apologized right away, it wouldn't have come to this. Don't you ever contact me again." With his usual callousness, he hung up, leaving me stunned and hurt. Realizing I couldn't risk taking my infant outside for long, I immediately reached out to my mom and explained the situation. After hanging up, the observant taxi driver, who had been witnessing everything, returned my luggage to the car and even opened the door for me. His unexpected enthusiasm made me smile, perhaps echoing the sentiment of Schadenfreude, finding joy in the misfortune of others. Arriving at my parents' house, I entrusted my child to my mom's care and sought legal advice. The lawyer listened to my story and confirmed my decision for divorce. Despite my emotions running wild, I recounted everything that led to this point. The divorce papers had been submitted without my consent, leading us into a mediation process. If we couldn't reach an agreement, court was the next step. But my mind was made up. It wasn't just about being insulted. It was about my husband's neglect towards our child and locking us out of the house. I couldn't let such behavior go unchecked, especially with a baby to protect. I instructed my lawyer to seek compensation for the emotional distress during pregnancy, child support, and property division. I knew my husband wouldn't agree to mediation, and even if we did, I doubted we'd find common ground. The lawyer explained the mandatory mediation before legal action, which dampened my spirits momentarily. But this was no longer just about me. It was about securing a future for my child. Rather than endure silently, I decided it was time to fight. Despite my husband's deceit with fake divorce papers, my intention for divorce remained firm. He deserved to face the consequences of his actions. I'm filing a complaint against my husband, I informed my lawyer. Shortly after, my husband was arrested by the police. It emerged that he had been cheating on me with another woman in a different house. Apparently, he had changed the locks right after I was hospitalized and had been living there proudly. However, he couldn't handle the chores or the mess and odor, so he moved in with his mistress. Living carefree there, he was caught off guard when the police arrived and arrested him. When I informed my in-laws about consulting with a lawyer, they tried to contact my husband but couldn't reach him. He hadn't returned to his parents' house either. They never suspected he would cheat, but it had been going on for months. Reflecting on it, there were signs. He'd often leave during the day and return late, claiming overtime. But with my morning sickness and dealing with his selfishness, I perhaps turned a blind eye, preferring the solitude. During the legal proceedings, my husband blamed me, portraying himself as a victim. But his childish behavior only worsened the situation. Eventually, he apologized, admitting his mistakes and expressing a desire to start over and see our baby. I heard all of this through my lawyer, and his request to clean up for once sparked the most intense irritation I had ever felt. That apology, coupled with his selfish demand, topped all the irritation I had ever felt. I instructed my lawyer to convey this message to him, ensuring he understood my feelings. After that, things finally reached a conclusion. Surprisingly, I received a fair share of the property and even more compensation for emotional distress than I had anticipated, despite my husband's infidelity. The house was in his name, so I willingly gave it up without hesitation. Frankly, I had no desire to deal with a messy, foul-smelling house. Regarding child support, it was agreed upon that he would pay monthly. However, I learned from my mother-in-law that he quit his job and resorted to part-time work after the incident became known at his company. He attempted to return to his parents' home, but his father refused him entry. Consequently, he sold our former house and relocated elsewhere. Considering his situation, I didn't hold high expectations for child support. However, my in-laws generously offered to assist for the sake of their grandchild, separate from my husband's payments. While I couldn't bring myself to accept money from them, I expressed my gratitude for their kind gesture. Now I'm back at my parents' house, taking time to rest and recuperate with their support. Eventually, I plan to move out with my child and start working toward a modest but happy life. I'm determined to do my best for both of us.
I never imagined my grandson would have a developmental disorder. He's like a broken toy, just useless. He's not good enough for our family. The moment my father blurted out those words, the atmosphere froze. It happened at my sister's funeral. She had been raising her son, who has a developmental disorder, as a single mother. But she passed away, leaving him behind. My parents were just talking nonsense. They were completely out of place, as if an invisible wall had been built around them, causing people to drift away. I didn't want my sister's son to hear what such people were saying. Thinking this, I covered his ears with my hands and glared at my parents. However, the two of them continued to talk about their selfish opinions without paying any attention to the surroundings. Take care of him yourself. We have no intention of dealing with him. Yes, that's right. Being infertile and not having kids isn't so bad when you have him. That made me so angry. My head was about to explode. I was already planning on taking care of him. I couldn't entrust him to people who could only think in such a biased way. Of course, we'll take care of raising him. We will definitely raise him with love, and we will cut ties with you. As my husband and I said this strongly, my parents left with a sneer, unaware of what they would face. As time passed, my name is Julia. I'm 30 years old, a working housewife living with my kind-hearted husband Nick, who is 1 year older than me. We don't have children. We had talked about wanting children before we got married, but it didn't happen. After tests, it was revealed that I have a condition that makes it difficult for me to get pregnant. We discussed for days whether to undergo treatment, but Nick said, "I'm happy as long as I can live happily with you, even without children. So I don't want you to worry too much." And my in-laws also said, "We just want you both to be happy. Yes, we will support whatever you two decide." I remember them saying kindly, which made me burst into tears. Until then, I had felt sorry for Nick and my in-laws. But hearing them, I thought, maybe I don't need to feel guilty since my family, Nick and my in-laws said it's okay not to have children. That's fine. As I came to think that way, my worries lessened and I feel more at ease. However, the worry did not completely disappear. The reason lies with my parents. They are concerned about what others think and always brought up the topic of children every time we met. Nick and my in-laws understand, so we plan to live together without kids. Even when I explain this, they would say, "Don't you want to repay us by giving us grandkids?" Or, "What will we do when our neighbors ask, 'Hasn't your eldest daughter had any children yet?'" Nick also tried to explain, but they wouldn't listen. "You're really a failure. I wish you would learn from your sister Erica." My parents always compared me with my sister Erica, who was 1 year younger than me. They favored her over me from the beginning, and the issue with children seemed to accelerate that. Erica was not only smart but also athletic and liked by everyone around her. She never bragged about her abilities, always humble and with good character. I liked her too, and we had a good relationship as sisters. I hardly got in touch with my parents, but Erica and I occasionally kept in touch. She has a son named David, now 6 years old. As he grew, it became apparent that he had a developmental disorder. That was the reason she had divorced her husband. "Sis, please keep this a secret from Mom and Dad," Erica said to me, considering their unusual concern for appearances. Who knows what they would say if they found out about David's developmental disorder? Of course, I agreed. While keeping David a secret from our parents, I have been helping her raise her child as a single mother. Then one day, I received a call from the police on my smartphone. "Are you Erica's sister? It's about your sister." After seeing that, the female police officer on the other end of the line fell silent, as if troubled. Something didn't feel right, and even though it wasn't hot, I was still sweating like crazy as my heart raced, and I tried to calm myself. She continued, "Erica has died in an accident." After inhaling sharply, I found myself unable to speak, my mouth hanging open with a mind gone blank. I somehow managed to convey what the police had said to Nick. He placed a hand on my shoulder, repeating Erica's name in an attempt to calm me amidst his own shock. Time quickly passed in a blur due to funeral preparations, and before we knew it, it was the night before the wake. Even then, I couldn't fully grasp that she was no longer in this world. I kept thinking she might call me the next day or that she might come over and have dinner with Nick and me again. I was preoccupied with such thoughts. I wondered whose funeral I was attending, though it felt like a dream. There was no mistake that Erica's name was present in the funeral hall, her portrait framed and displayed. Ah, is she really gone? While I was mourning with Erica's friends, I heard a voice echo through the funeral hall. "Look who decided to show up, our daughter who let us down. You still haven't managed to have a kid." I couldn't understand how they could say such things at their own daughter's funeral. My parents were acting like they couldn't see how upset everyone was and just kept insulting me. Friends and relatives looked at my parents with disbelief, clearly seeing the absurdity in their words. It was evident to everyone there that my parents were out of place, saying such bizarre things. However, being in public and grieving Erica's absence made me feel as if my heart was being torn apart. Not just Julia, it seems Erica was an embarrassment as well. All our affection for her seems foolish now. I never thought my grandson would have a developmental disorder. He's like a broken toy, just useless. He's not good enough for our family. My parents were just babbling nonsense. They were completely out of place, as if an invisible wall had been built around them, causing people to drift away. I didn't want my sister's son to hear what such people were saying. Thinking this, I covered his ears with my hands and glared at my parents. Take care of David yourself. We have no intention of dealing with him. Yes, that's right. Being infertile and not having kids isn't so bad when you have him. That made me so angry. My head was about to explode. I was already planning on doing that. I couldn't entrust him to people who could only think in such a biased way. Of course, we will take responsibility for raising this child. We will definitely raise him with love, and we will cut ties with you. After saying that, my parents briefly looked shocked but then scoffed. Oh, do as you please, and left the scene. 10 years later, David had turned 16. Although he initially seemed unsure and out of place living with us, he now appeared completely at ease. Having hit his growth spurt, he had grown rapidly, surpassing my height. David is not quite as tall as Nick yet, but he's getting there. He's growing like crazy. One day after work, Nick told me about a weirdo lurking near our place. He seemed pretty stressed out. Nick described seeing a person wearing a deep hooded parka, unable to discern their gender or age, looking like they were searching for someone. If you go out, Julia, please be careful, Nick advised. Heeding the advice, I was cautious about my surroundings for a few days when going out. However, I didn't encounter the suspicious individual Nick had mentioned. Perhaps they were no longer in the area. Just when I had let my guard down, on my way home from shopping, that person appeared in front of my house. 2 individuals were sitting boldly. Could they be thieves? No, that would be too conspicuous. Wondering about their purpose, I was about to reach for my smartphone to possibly call the police when they shouted, "Julia, is that you? We've been looking for you." I nearly dropped my smartphone in surprise. I managed to pocket it and look toward the duo who had called out. The hoods fell back, revealing without a doubt the faces of my parents. Having cut ties and not heard from them in 10 years, I never expected to see them again, especially coming to see me. Curiously, I looked at them wondering what they wanted. When did you build a house without telling us? If you have that kind of money, you should give some to us. You're such an ungrateful daughter, can't you think of us? I was dumbfounded by what they said. Indeed, my parents have been ostracized by their friends, colleagues, and relatives due to their appalling behavior at Erica's funeral. That makes sense. They were pointing fingers instead of understanding, which made them seem like heartless jerks to everyone, especially at my father's company where his usual arrogance had already spread bad rumors. Nobody doubted the rumors because it was typical of him to do something unreasonable. As a result, he was naturally moved to a less significant department. Somehow he managed to work there for 10 years but had recently opted for early retirement and became unemployed. So you're saying you're short on money, but you should have received a severance package. My father looked down, shaking his head in frustration. He had quickly squandered his severance pay and savings. However, I was more resigned than surprised. He had always been prone to wasting money, buying unnecessary things, and letting them collect dust. Even when I lived at home, presumably he had spent all his money, forgetting about the future lack of income, and came to rely on me when he realized he had no money for living expenses. I reported a failure like you until you were an adult, so it's only natural for you to repay us for those expenses. Faced with my father's illogical arguments, I instinctively put my hand to my forehead and sighed. Their refusal to consider getting jobs themselves was characteristically selfish in a bad way. How come you didn't pay us back before building your house? Your son, David, is a disaster, but you're still taking out a mortgage. My mother ran nonsensically. However, they seem to be misunderstanding something. We didn't take out any mortgage, though. What? My mother tilted her head, looking confused. I glanced at my father, who mirrored her expression. This house was made possible thanks to David. What do you mean? I decided to explain the whole story to my parents. David got really good at coding and used his ability to focus to make apps online. He had been interested in machines since he was young, often intently observing the family computer. Originally, I worked from home using a computer, and one day, seeing me, he expressed a desire to try it too. So I let him start with simple games. As he deepened his knowledge and got his own computer, he became even more engrossed. One of his apps became a hit, allowing us to lead a comfortable and happy life. Of course, not all the app's earnings were spent on buying the house. Most of it was saved. We plan to use it for David's education and living expenses so he can focus on what he loves. Well, if he's such an amazing kid, you should have said so earlier. Suddenly, my mother's attitude changed drastically, and she began to speak in a sweet voice. She put on a forced smile, with her lips trembling slightly, while my father made exaggerated hand gestures. A failure like you can't possibly nurture David's talent. We'll take him in. Have they forgotten what they said at Erica's funeral? Seeing their sickening behavior was unbearable. What are you talking about? You were saying horrible things before. My parents closed in on me step by step as I retreated. With no passers-by around, there was no one to call for help. Just as I was casting my gaze around, wondering what to do. What are you doing? Nick's cold voice resonated. Before I knew it, he was standing beside me, effectively putting an arm around my shoulder. Shut up, let us see David. That won't be possible, please go home. His resolute demeanor momentarily intimidated my parents, but they quickly regained their composure, glaring sharply and demanding to be let into the house. Stop if you plan to stay here any longer, I'm calling the police. With that, my parents reluctantly left. However, I couldn't shake the feeling that they wouldn't give up so easily. My predictions soon proved accurate as they reappeared several days later, dressed in the same suspicious parkas, making me rub my eyes in déjà vu. This time. However, there was a particular reason why we had planned to meet them, so their arrival was actually convenient. Let us in, we want to see David, they demanded over the intercom. Seemingly taken aback when I promptly let them in, looking somewhat bewildered, they walked into our home as if it were their own, inspecting everything from the television in the living room to the vase, Nick's collection of mangas, and the shelf filled with David's programming books. They touched everything without permission, displaying an irritating sense of entitlement. I've made some coffee for you, please take a seat. It was only after I invited them to sit that they finally stopped their invasive inspection and settled down at the dining table. My parents sat side by side with me, David and Nick opposite at them. I was anxious they might try to pull David away if he sat at the end. You know why we're here today, right? It's about David, of course. We knew that's what they were here for. Nick and I stiffened our expressions. Since we accepted you to take in David despite your infertility, he should at least pay us a reward. If we hadn't said anything, someone with a terrible personality like yours wouldn't have fought to take him in, right? I wanted to retort that the one with a terrible personality was them. After all, weren't they the ones who had no intention of taking David in? I still remembered the harsh words they had spewed at the funeral. They had clearly stated they had no intention of caring for David. Nick, with his good memory, must remember it just as I do. Come on, David, why don't you live with us? We raised your mother, Erica, with so much love. My mother began to fervently describe how much love they had poured into Erica since she was a child. How they never got angry at her, bought her books, toys, clothes, and accessories. Anything she wanted. How they celebrated her birthdays with grand parties at home. I remembered what my mother recounted, but also remembered how she would unfairly lash out at me as if I were to blame for something I hadn't done, and how I never received proper gifts from them. Erica seemed troubled by their favoritism too. When I was unjustly scolded in her place, she would cry and apologize, saying, "I'm sorry, sis, it's my fault." And on occasions like my birthday, she would secretly celebrate with me, gifting me cute hair accessories or cosmetics she bought with her allowance. Erica realized something was wrong with our parents' behavior and grew up normally and kind without being influenced by their mindset. Apparently, my parents mistook this as a result of their good parenting. See, just like I raised Erica to be such a gentle child, I'll raise you the same way. My parents poured their hopeful gaze into David. However, he made a puzzled face and said to me and Nick, "Who are these people?" It had been 10 years since he last saw them, and perhaps due to their lack of money, their appearances had drastically aged and became unkempt, making it understandable that he didn't recognize them. Shocked by being forgotten, my parents were speechless, their mouths opening and closing without words. Frozen, leaning forward at the table, Nick handed them something. My father, noticing it first, slowly turned his gaze and opened the envelope to pull out its contents. "What? How did you get this?" My mother, prompted by my father's surprised voice, looked over, and they both saw documents proving their gambling debts. Nick had suspected their identities as the suspicious individuals from the beginning and had hired a detective agency to investigate. "We cannot hand over David to you, not just because of your financial instability due to deaths, but also because you're not trustworthy as individuals." Nick's tone was stern, a rarity when he speaks to his elders, conveying his anger. "Besides, we've already cut ties, right? So we owe you nothing." Nick nodded firmly in agreement. "Stay away from our precious son, David." Intimidated by his assertiveness, my parents collapsed from their chairs with a clatter. They didn't seem to hurt themselves badly, but struggled to stand up due to their weakness. "Damn it, why are you all so ungrateful?" With those parting words, they finally left. Nick and I watched them leave and then hugged David tightly, relieved. Later, we heard the parents had to sell their house to pay off their debts. "Please let us stay for a while. We have nowhere to go." They had asked relatives and acquaintances, but no one would take them in. Their behavior at the funeral had spread, and no one wanted to invite such unreasonable people into their homes for fear of what they might do. That's what they deserved. They came to us, but we firmly refused. "We prefer if you didn't involve us any further. As I've said before, we've cut ties with you. It was your decision to accept this, so we're under no obligation to provide you with money or a place to live." With that, they left with a look of despair and have not returned since. We told them we'd call the cops if they came back, and that seemed to scare them off. Without a place to stay, they began living almost like homeless people, unable to secure a job due to their age and surviving day to day on short-term jobs. There was this middle-aged couple scanning job listings at the grocery store, but I left before I could figure out if they were my parents. They couldn't afford their phone bills anymore and had to cancel their smartphones. I changed my number just in case, ensuring they can't contact us anymore. We no longer have to fear the doorbell or phone ringing. The three of us now live in peace. I continue my work from home, and David is next to me, working on his computer, developing new apps. He always happily shares his progress with me and Nick. I wonder if he'll tell us about his next app completion. I look forward to it and can't wait to see what he creates next. Together with Nick, I'm committed to nurturing David's talents further.